My mother died, and my father quickly found another woman. Am I right that I kicked her out of the house? My mother was my entire universe. I have fond memories of reading books with her, watching documentaries, and embarking on road trips together. Whenever my sister and I fell ill, she would bake us cookies. Alongside my father, we would go hiking every other week. I still miss her to this day. At the age of 11, I lost her to a car accident. That year was the most challenging of my life, and things haven't improved much since then. 2 years after her passing, my father began a relationship with a woman named Nicole. 4 years into their relationship, they are now engaged. Nicole is younger than my father. Initially, I noticed my father retreating into himself after he started dating her, but eventually their relationship evolved differently. Nicole reintroduced a sense of adventure into my father's life, often going on extravagant trips and frequent nights out. However, during this period, I felt ignored. My father gradually ceased our weekly hiking trips with my sister and me. His phone calls became less frequent, and he even forgot my mother's birthday one year. After Nicole entered our lives, I felt like I was gradually losing my father. His presence in our lives seemed to diminish. One particular incident stands out. My sister fell down the stairs when we were home alone and sustained a large cut on her forehead that clearly required stitches. I immediately called my father, but Nicole answered the phone. She refused to hand the phone over to him, claiming he was busy, and abruptly ended the call before I could say anything else. I was left with no choice but to ask our neighbor to take us to urgent care, where my father eventually met us. Nicole even had the audacity to replace my mother's picture on the fireplace mantel with a photo of her and my father from their trip to Washington. What pushed me over the edge was when she caused my father to forget my mother's birthday. It was a tradition for my sister, my father, and me to visit my mother's grave on her birthday every year, even before Nicole came into our lives. Nicole and my father had planned a trip to Florida and were due back 3 days before my mother's birthday. However, due to Nicole's motion sickness, my father decided to split the return drive into smaller sections to accommodate her, which resulted in him missing our annual visit. He didn't even have the decency to call us. Less than a week later, my father announced an exciting surprise. Nicole was pregnant. In my anger, I lashed out at my father, accusing him of neglecting us for Nicole. I then turned to Nicole and told her she was a despicable person who needed to leave our lives. My father responded by shouting at me to go to my room. Later that day, my grandfather arrived unexpectedly to take me to his house. My father didn't bother to communicate with me about this arrangement. As I left, he couldn't even bring himself to look at me. It's been 2 days since I've been at my grandparents' house. Although I feel some shame for my outburst, I can't say I feel overwhelming regret. Am I the antagonist in this situation? Now I'm going to answer some of the most popular comments on this story, and then move on to a very interesting update. You didn't say your age, but I hope you can move out soon. I appreciate it. I'm 17 and I've spoken to school counselors too. No one is willing to help me. I've tried talking with my dad about how I feel way before my outburst, but it always ends with, "It happened years ago. It's time to move on." I don't even know what that means. My sister can't get help either, so I'm trying to peacefully exist for her. I am 17, my sister is 13, my dad is 44, and Nicole is 34. Has Nicole ever tried to connect? I ran out of characters in the original post, but that's the thing. Nicole never made any effort to talk to us apart from when we go out for family dinners, or when we are at parties. Even then, the conversations are always about her. My dad invited her on our hikes early in their relationship, but she didn't like being outside. And over time, my dad stopped taking us hiking even when we asked him. Nicole does pottery from time to time, and I've invited her to my Art Honor Society events, but she always declined. We've made every effort to get to know her, but she only seems interested in talking with my dad. She doesn't understand we are a part of his life too. Grandparents and their role in this? I didn't touch on this before, but I am currently living with my paternal grandparents. They live the closer to us than my maternal side grandpa. I've tried talking to my paternal grandparents too, but it was also a very wishy-washy conversation. Not to say it didn't help at times, but it's clear that they were justifying my dad's actions at every chance rather than hearing me out. I don't want to live like this. I hate holding resentment, but I can't help it. I've asked my dad about therapy, but he doesn't believe in that type of support. This morning, I asked my paternal grandparents if I could spend Thanksgiving at my maternal grandpa's place, but they refused. And that's another thing. I can't escape the situation or the bad feelings if I wanted to. IK, Dad, and Nicole will come over for Thanksgiving, and I'll have to sit there. Counseling. I want grief counseling mainly, but even just help working through my resentment towards my dad and Nicole is enough. I don't want to go to bed crying every other night. I don't want to feel hate. I just want to be mentally at peace. My dad doesn't believe in therapy or counseling. I don't know what made him hold those views, but it's made it harder for my sister and I to get help. I've secretly talked to school counselors, my paternal grandparents, my dad, my aunt, Dad's sister. But it's never a productive conversation. The only person who has helped me the most was my maternal grandpa, but we are barely allowed to see him. I've calmly expressed how I felt to my dad on multiple occasions. You said you talked to your school counselor? What do they say? They can't point me towards a resource without my dad's consent. The conversations usually end with to continue to speak with my dad. I don't expect them to have a solution to every situation, but it would be nice to just be heard fully. I also have to censor a few details when I speak with them because they have sent a police officer to my house in the past. My dad was angry about that situation, and I don't want him to feel angry with me. As for therapy, my dad doesn't believe in therapy or counseling, so I'm limited with options. More on the police visit. When I spoke to the school counselor, I mentioned that when my dad and Nicole were traveling abroad, he left me and my sister home alone for 3 days and forgot to leave us some money to get food. Because of this, a police officer was sent to our home to check on us, and my dad got angry about me sharing family information to strangers. Another time, he forgot to pick up my sister from swim practice for an hour or so. My dad got a call from the swim place, and he told me to walk, 30 minutes walk, and get my sister. As for feelings, I feel like my mind is a bit lighter, and my heart doesn't feel as heavy as before. It helped me process my emotions somewhat. Maybe you need to tell the school counselor what is going on regardless. I've debated about it, but at the end of the day, my sister and I still need our dad. He financially supports us, and we still live in his home. He has control over our college funds, so the last thing I want is to jeopardize that. Also, my sister is still young, and I know she still needs him even if he is emotionally unavailable. I don't want that to potentially be taken away from her. First update. I reached out to my maternal grandfather while the rest of the house was still enveloped in sleep. The conversation stretched on for 2 hours, during which I poured out everything that I've shared here. I also expressed my desire to live with him if it was at all feasible. However, he admitted that despite his longing to rescue me from my current circumstances, his hands were tied without my father's consent. I subtly suggested a legal intervention, but he was apprehensive, fearing that it might lead to him losing contact with us altogether. During our conversation, my grandfather also divulged some previously unknown information about my father. He recalled an incident from when I was 14, and my sister was just 10. Our father had left us at our grandfather's farm while he and Nicole took a flight. The day after their return, our grandfather drove us back home. We were still asleep in the back seat of his car when he arrived at our house. However, when he knocked on the door, my father answered in a visibly inebriated state. From his limited vantage point, my grandfather could see that the house was in utter disarray. He decided to take us back to his place and told my father that he would return us the next day when he was sober. However, the following morning, my grandfather received a threatening call from my father, warning him of police involvement if he didn't bring us back immediately. My grandfather concluded by saying that he planned to discuss our situation with my paternal grandparents to see if they could help in any way. Second interesting update. On Thanksgiving, when my father and Nicole arrived, I sought to have a conversation with them. My father, however, was unresponsive and retreated to the living room. Nicole, who was still at the entrance, received my apologies for my previous offensive remarks. Her response was curt, stating that she had to leave, and then she joined my father in the living room. She appeared to be still upset with me, which was understandable. Dinner was an uncomfortable affair as my grandmother attempted to facilitate a conversation between my father and me, but to no avail. Post-dinner, I tried apologizing to my father once more, but he ignored me and proceeded to Nicole. Uncertain about whether I would be returning home with him, I packed all my belongings. As he prepared to leave, I asked if I could return home with him, but he replied that Nicole was not comfortable with my presence at home despite the passage of a few days since our altercation. The night was spent in tears on a call with my sister. Subsequent to my discussion with my maternal grandfather, he contacted my paternal grandparents a few days later to discuss my predicament. I happened to overhear their conversation. My maternal grandfather voiced his concerns about me, particularly my mental health, and queried if they could persuade my father to consider therapy for me. They proposed that I could attend their church's mental support group or speak with their faith leader who specializes in grief counseling. However, my grandfather advocated for professional help, a suggestion they did not warm up to. They also had a heated exchange about my living situation. My grandfather criticized my father's decision to evict his own daughter and expressed disappointment at my paternal grandparents' lack of urgency in helping me return home. That was all I could gather from their conversation. Currently, I attend weekly private sessions with the faith leader, courtesy of my grandmother. While this arrangement is not entirely satisfactory, it has been somewhat beneficial in helping me manage my grief. I continue to live with my grandparents. Despite multiple attempts to apologize to my father via text and through my grandparents, he remains unresponsive. He has also blocked my maternal grandfather, who has tried to reach him numerous times. I am contemplating sharing the entire situation with my school counselor next semester without holding anything back to protect my father. I was excluded from the Christmas dinner hosted by my father and Nicole, which was hurtful. However, I am gradually becoming indifferent towards maintaining a relationship with my father. My feelings might change, but I am not certain. Strangely enough, his decision to not let me return home has been beneficial, as it has allowed me to focus on myself. Let's read some more interesting comments on the new update. Is your sister still in the house? I ran out of characters in the update, but my sister is still living with my dad. She visits me over weekends, and I've walked home with her from school, so I still have some contact. Text him once more and say you're not sorry. Have him sign away his parental rights and then go scorched earth. I've thought about this long and hard to the point it had mentally consumed me. I've imagined every revenge and final say moments, but one thing I've recognized in therapy is how much my resentment and anger has been holding me back from moving on. I am now just trying to emotionally detach from them. I have every intention to involve the school counselor for my sister. You've done the right thing. Thank you. I'm looking forward to college and putting this behind me in time. I'm trying to convince my grandparents to allow my sister to live with them full-time, so she has some semblance of peace. Has your father stopped leaving your sister alone for days at a time? He hasn't gone on any major trips since the end of November, but he definitely will for his California trip in January. I've asked my grandparents if they could let her stay over during then and honestly for the foreseeable future. Last intriguing update. In retrospect, I realized that I made a foolish mistake when I disclosed to my sister about my scheduled meeting with the school counselor. During our phone conversation, I didn't explicitly mention my intent to report our father, but she became extremely upset and started crying, pleading me not to do so. To calm her down, I assured her that I wouldn't go ahead with the meeting, even though I had every intention of doing so. The meeting was planned for the second week of January when our father was in California. The night before the meeting, I received an unexpected call from my father. He warned me not to spread false accusations about him to the counselor if I ever wanted a place to live again. I reassured him that I wouldn't do such a thing and ended the call. This was the first time we had spoken in days, and I had given no indication of reporting him. It dawned on me that my sister must have informed him, so I called her for clarification. She admitted that she had inadvertently revealed my plans during a conversation with our father. Despite these developments, I decided to proceed with the counselor meeting and disclosed everything that had been happening. I requested the counselor not to inform my father about our meeting, to which he agreed. At the end of our discussion, he handed me several pamphlets for mental health support and promised to follow up with me. He evaded my questions about what would happen next. The day after the meeting, upon returning from school, my paternal grandfather summoned me for a discussion. He informed me that the school had contacted my father to arrange a meeting with the counselor. He became furious with me, threatening that my actions could result in my sister and her baby being taken away. He scolded me for lying and expressed his disappointment in me. His anger was frightening. I had never seen this side of him before. As a consequence, I was grounded and forbidden from driving or visiting friends for a few weeks. I'm unsure of the specifics of the meeting between the counselor and my father. However, from a phone call between my grandfather and father, I gathered that a police officer was present at the meeting and that a wellness check would be conducted. My father denied all the allegations I had made to the counselor, attributing them to my bitterness over the loss of my mother. The aftermath of these events has taken a toll on my mental health. I often ask my friend to stay on the phone with me or spend time alone in my room. As an additional punishment, my grandmother stopped taking me to see the faith leader. This is my current predicament. How do you like this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Let's get 1,000 subscribers on this channel.